I'm going to take a minute tonight and tell you about something I've been doing this evening with my wife. Actually this afternoon. We're getting to be afternoon people if we can arrange it rather than evening. And our son and daughter-in-law decided that, or made it known to us that our grandson was going to be in a musical play over in Randolph and Rich County, and we've tried to go to those whenever they've had them. And we knew there was one coming up, but anyway, it turned out that it was today. We drove over and went to the musical. Easton was in it, and it was not my favorite musical. I have to be honest. It's called Freaky Friday Musical, and I'd never seen of it or heard of it before, and I was a little concerned about my wife because she has hearing aids, and they had microphones, and it seemed like they were just screaming a lot of their lines, and I wondered how she was going to survive that. But anyway, I asked her afterwards, and she said she took them out partway through. So, but it made me. We had in the same setting where a lot of our kids have been involved in musicals, and I couldn't help but reflect back through the years to all the different musicals. Some of them were in 2 or 3, and others maybe just 1 or 2, but it was an experience that I think all of them, as far as I know, would put on the plus side of the ledger. It was hard. They had to memorize lines. They had to put a lot of time into it when their schoolwork and their athletics and other things was begging for some of that same time. And yet, it was a positive. I'm grateful. I'm very grateful for the teachers that they had. And the good things that happened because of the time that they put in, the dedication that they had to it. Part of my appreciation for it, I think, stems back from when I first taught over at Northridge in the high school, just a small high school, smaller than you can imagine for most of you. But they had a tradition in the senior class that they would put on a drama production of some sort. It wouldn't be a musical, but sometimes it would be a melodrama type thing or a mystery or something. And when I first started teaching there, I kind of received the assignment, and I grew to enjoy it because I saw a lot of development in some of the students. There are some of those students that seemed quite withdrawn until they had that experience, and then after that experience, it was like a breakthrough for them when they could actually act like they were somebody else and just, for lack of a better term, maybe just be silly. I always told them this. I said, think of it this way: if you're going to make a fool of yourself, and sometimes that's what they thought it was when you were up on stage doing stuff you wouldn't normally do. Anyway, I told them, I said, if look at it this way: if you're going to make a fool of yourself, make enough of a fool of yourself that they won't even recognize that it's you. In other words, go 100% and exaggerate everything. That was one of the things that I told them to do, is exaggerate everything. Exaggerate their motions with their mouth and their hands and their eyeballs and whatever else they did. is to exaggerate it. I tried to even get them, I remember, to exaggerate the pauses so that the words wouldn't come quite so fast in different places, that the audience couldn't be brought along with the experience, because that's where they got their reward, is having the audience interact and laugh and enjoy it with them. And I remember that we did usually 3 performances. We'd do one matinee for the elementary school that was in the same building, and then we would do one for, or at least 2 for the adults and their parents and everything. Anyway, it turned out to be really good experiences, and one of the things that came out of that, that's kind of a first for the area, for me definitely, was that we decided one time that we would try to tackle and do a musical. Now, I don't have a musical background at all, and so it was quite an undertaking for us to even get to that point. But I can remember the one that we picked out was called Annie, Get Your Gun. And we thought that might be a good one to start with, because it wasn't as staged as a lot of them could have been that we might have picked, and kind of had a Western setting to it, and a theme that we thought the audience and parents would kind of enjoy, and the kids too, as they got into it. So we did Annie, Get Your Gun, the 3-act play, and I'll never forget it. Kind of scared me to begin with, because like I said, I didn't have any musical background. And I mean, I couldn't even read notes or anything else. But what I found out is, if you really want to do it, the kids want to do it, there's usually a way. And the way, in this case, was a lady by the name of Carmen Madsen. She lived in the Garden City area, about 10 miles away from the school. A little more, actually, because she lived on the north side of town. But somehow, with a phone call, I was able to get her to come and talk to me about helping to play the musical score to that production of Annie, Get Your Gun. Now, it wasn't, now today, you would be able to just go somewhere and find a musical score already done that you could just record and play, and the kids could sing to that. But back in that day, either I was naive or else it wasn't available. I wasn't aware of it being available. So I talked to Carmen, and bless her heart, she said she would do it. And you don't know what that means until you've made a commitment like that. Somebody that hasn't had the experience, and that, like I said, it was a 25-mile drive for her to come up and practice by the time she made the round trip. And each one of those kids had to sing certain songs, and they hadn't done it before, and it just took a lot of time, a lot of repetition. I was out of my element in trying to pull something like that off. The one thing I think that I gained out of it, from the standpoint of Carmen's volunteerism, is that people that volunteer literally make the world go round, because there isn't a single one of those kids that would have had that experience, and I wouldn't have been able to pull it off either without Carmen helping with the musical score. And she offered a lot of other good suggestions too. So I have a lot of praise and a lot of just a lot of good feelings about her willingness to do something like that. She wasn't offered any money. She didn't get paid anything. In fact, it cost her because of the gas and everything. And she didn't have kids involved in it either. A lot of times people will volunteer if they've got kids involved, but she didn't have, and I was just blown away by the kind of person that she was. And she's never disappointed me since that time. I've always been really grateful for her. I congratulate myself a little bit for Abe being I guess I was the catalyst. I don't know if somebody mentioned it to me or not, but if so, I may have mentioned it and somebody said, why don't you try this one or that one and see if you... Anyway, long story short, I think to my knowledge, it was the first 3-act musical play that was ever performed in Rich County. I don't think I've ever heard of another 3-act musical that was ever done. So I broke a little ground there, I guess, along with some great kids and a marvelous volunteer that helped with the musical score. It was a learning experience. And I don't know what that had to do with the history of all of the musicals now that have been done in Rich County. It's actually, there's been lots of them done, really nice musicals at the high school. Even though there was a pause or two after I did that one, I just couldn't pull it off every year. But someone else picked it up, and Mr. Williamson did a number of them with my children, and all of my children were just thankful for the experience. I think if they could be here and talk about it, they would say that. They expressed it to me, and I felt it even from the ones that didn't express it so much. The arts, and I don't care what art it is really, are something that I think in our society that really needs to be preserved and sought for. I know my wife and I would, for several years when we lived like down in the Bear Lake West there for a few years, we bought season tickets to the Hale Center Theater in Salt Lake, which was kind of a theater in the round. I don't know if any of you have experienced that, but we were just country bumpkins and kind of bumped into it and was kind of blown away by the experience that we had there. And so we bought season tickets back in the day, and we watched a lot of musicals that were done there in the round by very professional people that did get paid, and they sounded like they got paid. I mean, it was really high quality. But the arts, whether it's that or, for example, in high school, I had a band experience. In elementary is where it started. I think I've mentioned it. And I had a trumpet. And I wasn't not a standout at all, but partly because of a wonderful band teacher that we had that just put his whole heart and soul into it. And it just, I don't know how to explain it. He was just so excited when he'd stand up there on that little wooden stand in front of us. And if we happened to hit a right note, he would just jump up in the air and animate himself and throw his baton against the wall in excitement because it sounded so good. And somehow it drew us into the experience to the point that to this day, when I hear orchestral music, for example, in Pirates of the Caribbean is one that comes to mind. When I hear that, the music in the background and it makes me think of him up there on that little wooden stand. And I've even been known, my wife will tell you I get a little goofy sometimes, but I like to just get somewhere and start throwing my arms around like I was an orchestra leader while all that music that comes out in that the movie series, the Pirates of the Caribbean. And even today, I've got a sound recording. When it comes on in the car, I turn it up almost full blast. Again, to my wife's dismay, because she didn't feel it the same way I do. But it stirs the soul. What else can I say? It just stirs the soul. And I think of all those musicians that can play all those instruments and do it in such a professional way and make all that variety of sounds and just do me a favor, pull up the soundtrack to Pirates of the Caribbean and you listen to it and turn it up and see if you don't get the same feelings that I get now that I've described them to you a little bit. Imagine yourself with a baton, working with that orchestra and just feeling the build up of emotion as they reach their different crescendos and different things. The arts are worth preserving. It's too bad that sometimes in school budgets, I know it was the case when in the school district where I spent my career, quite often if they've had tight budget years, the first thing they'd talk about cutting is some of the arts programs, because it wasn't math, science, English, and social studies, which is where the kids got tested to see if the school was any good, which is kind of a shame in my way of thinking. And so they start talking about cutting the arts program. And I can remember going in and meeting with school board and telling them how I wish they would not do that. Don't cut the arts program just because you need to squeeze a few extra dollars here and there. Find some different alternatives. It's too easy to cut and it's too hard to get back. And I was grateful for the opportunity to go in, and I think I made a difference in some situations, along with some other people that joined with me, and we were able to save them cutting some of the music and arts programs in the schools, because they are, it's been said that how's it going? The regular school is to make a living, and the arts are to make a life. And I think there's some truth to that, because some of those stirrings of the soul honestly make you feel life. And I've seen some good musicals on television. Maybe you have too. Les Miserables. I've seen that on TV and live too at the Capitol Theater in Salt Lake. And you see movies like West Side Story and Oklahoma and Carousel, which is one that our school did in my senior year. And the list goes on. But I've been touched by musicals and the arts in general. So do what you can to preserve them, and you'll be glad that you did. And if you can get your kids to participate, or somebody you know, or I started playing a mouth organ. Had no clue that, other than I'd heard my dad do it. There was one song that he'd play that I kind of enjoyed. I can remember buying a mouth organ, and it was called Turkey in the Straw. And he knew how to play it, and it wasn't too long after I bought that mouth organ that I could pretty much imitate him. I'm not sure either one of us were very professional by any means, but I could. It was one that they used to square dance to, the old timers did, and there's some rhythms and repetitions in it, just playing a mouth organ. And then I found out that if I could play some songs that I could remember, and there were actually songs that worked with me in the mouth organ, because I wasn't sophisticated in different keys or anything like that. Didn't know anything about them, in fact. But if I happened to pick one that I could do, then pretty soon I noticed my kids, my grandkids, even my wife would say, "Why don't you get your mouth organ? We'll go to the campfire tonight. You can play some mouth organ music around the campfire." And sometimes I'd try to imitate one that was one that I kind of liked was from the musical called Paint Your Wagon. I don't know if you've seen it or not. It's kind of a crazy, goofy movie, but it really grows on you. And there was a song in there called "I Was Born Under a Wandering Star." And somehow I was able to, it required kind of the mouth organ, just a single note in most of it. And somehow I was able to get that to play on my mouth organ. And I found myself even enjoying playing it to myself sometimes if I get in a quiet spot. I was born under a wandering star. And I'd play that on my mouth organ. And it's kind of soothing. So anyway, not sure why I chose that to get rambling off on tonight. But I guess this all started with our effort today to go to our grandson's musical. And I think they're going to do a big one next year, from what I hear. That might even be Les Miserables, which would be a really hard one to do. But boy, it would build some experiences. Well, anyway, so that's the fact that I was able to be instrumental, along with some helpers, in pulling off the first 3-act musical in Ridge County was I'll call it a feather in my cap. Might as well just, without patting myself too hard on the back, because Carmen Matson and some of the others are the ones that really deserve the help or the pat. But anyway, we pulled it off. And I'm not usually one to talk about firsts, because I don't want to crow about anything that I did. Really, that's not my goal, even though I'll claim it. Oh, I'll claim this one too, and it's really stupid. But I was the first person to swim in Bear Lake in this millennium, 1,000-year period, starting with year 2000. The very first one. Do you know why I know? Because I planned it. I'll tell you about it. Then you can disown me if you want. But I thought, I'm going to go down to what we called the First Point boat ramp. And it kind of leaned out over the water, Bear Lake. And I thought, I'm going to go down there at the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve. Now, keep in mind, Bear Lake, December 31st, New Year's Eve. All right, so I'm down at Bear Lake. I mentioned to somebody to see if they wanted to come with me, and nobody wanted to come, so I was going to have to go alone. But then I got a nephew, my nephew Blake, consented to come along with me. And we took some smoked oysters that I got for Christmas. I kind of liked them, but I hadn't opened them yet. Some smoked oysters in some cans. And I told him what I had in mind, and he was going to be my stopwatch guy and make sure that I was in the air over the lake at exactly the stroke of midnight, so that I could splash down and claim to be the first one in Bear Lake in this millennium. I don't know about me. Anyway, so we went down, sat in the truck, and kind of watched the clock till it got close. And when it got close, I was in my swimming suit, took my trousers off and got ready and ran out on the ramp, and I waited for him to give me the go signal, and he did, and I ran out on the ramp and flew up in the air as far as I could. Splashed down in the cold, cold waters of Bear Lake and claimed my prize of being the first human being in Bear Lake in this millennium. Now that's going to stand for a long time, see. They did more three-act plays, but nobody's going to be the first one into the lake in this millennium but me for at least 1,000 years. So anyway, we had fun. I hadn't had a bonding experience with Blake during the whole thing. In fact, I think the next year he says, "Will you do it again?" I said, "No, let's not. I don't want to claim another prize. It wasn't that fun." But, well, that reminds me, when we got done, they were having a New Year's Eve party up at the church. The ward up there in the town, anyway, was having a New Year's Eve celebration of some sort in the cultural hall. And I walked in, and I think they were bringing in the New Year's Eve, waiting for the stroke of midnight or whatever. Anyway, the party was still going when we got there. I guess it was about to close down, but I walked in my swimming suit, and I did have a bathrobe around me, and I was hunting for my wife or somebody there, I think, and people wanted to know what I was doing there in my bathrobe, and I told them. Next thing I knew, they were taking pictures of me and all kinds of goofy stuff, but that was in my more frivolous days. I normally don't act like that. Anyway, it's out now, and I guess I'll probably keep it here on this upload unless I decide to delete the whole thing, but because of that. But there's some other things. Well, anyway, and by the way, that's not an art. You don't have to work to preserve that one. But the musicals that we go to and have gone to and may end up in your communities, and your children or you might have an opportunity to participate in them, I would definitely encourage it. It makes for a higher quality life, I believe. It just has a way of making you feel accomplished and fulfilled when you've given it your best and somebody enjoyed it. Whether it's singing and acting on a stage or not so much jumping in the water at the stroke of midnight on the New Year's Eve of the new millennium. But anyway, you might not want to tell anybody this story, because I realize I probably tainted the family reputation with it. And if you tell it, you'll be tainted too. But just the same, I love you. And we have to laugh sometimes, don't we? Don't we? Good night.